released a statement a couple of days ago saying that Grand Theft Auto 6 will fail. And immediately I was bombarded with comments saying, well, actually, that game is going to be wildly successful and sell a ton of comment. Yes, that's what I said. The game is going to sell a ton of units, 100 million units, and still fail because Grand Theft Auto is not just a video game, it's basically a an idol, the basically the representation of everything wrong with not only gaming but in society as a whole. The fact that we prop up some mediocre open world franchise just because you can run around shooting cops doesn't make the game good. It doesn't make it engaging. It doesn't make it fresh, original, or exciting. The simple fact of the matter is nobody actually likes Grand Theft Auto. It is not a fun video game to play. The only reason people play it is because it's the mature game for mature gamers. It is everything wrong with video games condensed into one IP. There is no creativity, there is no originality, there is no reason to keep coming back and again and again. Grand Theft Auto is a complete and total joke that only sells to the kind of person that doesn't actually like or play video games. That's Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto will do well, but it will not drive sales for Xbox and PlayStation. It will not save other unrelated third parties, and the gaming crash is going to continue unabated. That is why Grand Theft Auto 6 will be a failure, because it will not save the gaming industry. Grand Theft Auto, alongside every other major gaming IP that has not yet made the jump to Nintendo consoles, is going to flounder on these failing pieces of alternative hardware and just get buried by the legions of better games on the better piece of hardware, right? Something like Rhythm Heaven isn't going to outperform Grand Theft Auto, but Rhythm Heaven coupled with Tamagotchi Life, coupled with Mario Kart, coupled with Donkey Kong Bonanza, we are going to have variety in our game lineups. A lot of these games are going to sell upwards of 10 million units. A lot of them are going to do very, very well for themselves. The sales of those games are going to drive the sales of other games. Something that Grand Theft Auto has completely failed at over the years. Like Nintendo, the Pokemon brand is a really good example of this, right? Why is Pokemon bigger than Grand Theft Auto? It has more reasonable development cycles. We get a new gen every 3 years or so. We get actual spin-offs. We get merchandising. We get, mobile games, animated series. We get the works, right? Pokemon, the trading card game, Pokemon is a brand that can actually create synergy with itself. A couple of years back, people were whining about Pokemon Sword and Shield launching the way it did because they should have just delayed the card game. That's not how it works. A major part of their business strategy is creating synergy with the other aspects of the brand. They have to release new gens around the same time they as other products. It's a constantly evolving brand, right? That's always introducing new characters and new ideas and new things into the franchise, right? Pokemon has the greatest brand synergy I've ever seen. And I think a lot of people don't really understand what makes it so successful. Grand Theft Auto 6 is Grand Theft Auto is a really interesting comparison because on the surface, you would imagine Grand Theft Auto was a way bigger brand than Pokemon, with how people talk about it and how many people play these games and just how much they sell. But the reality of the situation is Grand Theft Auto cannot succeed in anything outside of the mainstream mainline video game entries because the reason Grand Theft Auto is popular, the fact that it's the most cutting edge open world crime simulator there is, right? It simply isn't replicatable on weaker hardware or in like any other like uh, variety of games. So like for example, like you couldn't produce a video game in the Grand Theft Auto universe where you're a normal person who is not a criminal, living his everyday life and like, getting into like, scuffles with gangs and like working to make his way out and like they would never do what Yakuza does, right? Where like a major part of the plot is that like the characters actually do treat civilians with respect and actually don't get into fights like at the press of a button, right? Like the entire appeal of Grand Theft Auto is that you're a loose cannon who goes around just running over, driving over squirrels, and just causing general mayhem. Right? You can't have any variation on that. You can't grow the brand. You can't do anything differently other than what they've always been doing. You know, this is why something like Chinatown Wars didn't do all that well. This is why nobody like remembers the first two games. Right, the entire appeal is being 3D and just murdering progressively more realistic looking NPCs. Like without that, Grand Theft Auto has nothing. There is nothing to the brand that would contribute to like say a trading card game or a board game or like there's just nothing there. Like at its core, Grand Theft Auto is very 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 generic and very uninspired, and that's actually a really a strength of theirs when it comes to like selling their mainline video games. But when it comes to like building an actual brand, when it comes to like having to compete with something like Pokemon, like it just completely falls flat on its face, right? Grand Theft Auto is never going to be able to compete with Pokemon. People are going to start realizing that like Nintendo games are better made and more engaging, right? Mario Kart is actually does have the capacity to be bigger than Grand Theft Auto. Um, Grand Theft Auto is going to have this like period where it stagnates and then it falls. Like once it stops being like seen as the prestigious, AAA, the AAA game, I think Rockstar, Grand Theft Auto is going to fall off very, 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 very quickly, right? Like you can't spend 12 years, actually 13 years producing a video game and then have it come out and then be underwhelming compared to like what Nintendo is doing, right? Um, I imagine a bunch of like delusional fanboys will continue defending Grand Theft Auto no matter what, but I do think the path forward is clear when it comes to like how Red Dead Redemption 2 was received and just what's been happening since then. Like people put Rockstar games on a pedestal just because they're Rockstar games, but when you actually sit down and play them, like you'll see anybody who plays more than two games a year will see that they progressively decline in quality, that they're not interesting, that they're not evolving, that they're not really doing a whole lot. They're taking themselves way, way too seriously. I do think that's the big thing that's been like causing the franchise to circle the drain since Grand Theft Auto 4 came out is that like yeah, these games take themselves way too seriously for what they are. And they have to because like if you can't take them seriously, they're not mature enough. You know? it's but I do think that like when it comes to like actual hardcore video gamers, actual players who like play these games. Like I'm seeing more and more people talk about like how like Grand Theft Auto 5 was not that good. Like I know people who like bought that day one, popped it in and were just like this is awful. And I think anybody who's like an actual mature adult will kind of feel the same way. Like that's the great irony of Grand Theft Auto, I think, is that like it purports itself to be like a mature game for mature gamers, but in actuality, like its biggest audience, its player base are basically little children, people who just want to run red lights and just want to like fire guns and don't know anything about what's going on. That's the Grand Theft Auto audience, is just like uh, people that have just gotten out of preschool. Okay, that's the Grand Theft Auto audience. That's the people who are amused by like just running around this empty open world, just attacking people. Like Grand Theft Auto is for little children.